Welcome back to the Play by Play Podcast YouTube channel, where today we are going to be talking about a story that has completely rocked the sports world, not just the basketball world, but the sports world in general. Because this prior Thursday morning, Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, and Damon Jones were all arrested in connection to a major illegal gambling scheme. A scheme which, by the way, isn't just connected to these three players, but also 30 other people who were in connection to this whole thing. And there could possibly be more. And this story just gets crazier and crazier the more that you look into it. So without further ado, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and hop into this thing. So like I just mentioned, Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups, along with Miami Heat player Terry Rozier, were arrested in connection to a big-time illegal gambling scheme. But why? What happened? What did these guys do? That is the major question. So first of all, let's go through the case. And I'm going to try to explain this the best that I can. And we're going to start off with Chauncey Billups because he has connections to both of the sides in this major scheme as a whole. So Billups, if you guys did not know, is a former top 5 NBA draft pick. He is, well, or at least he was at this point, a future Hall of Famer. He's an NBA champion. He is a former NBA Finals MVP. He enjoyed a very long career with the Detroit Pistons and teams like the Denver Nuggets as well. And Damon Jones, he's actually a former teammate of LeBron James. Used to play with LeBron back in those mid-2000s days with those mid-2000s Cleveland Cavaliers. That's who those two are, just to paint a little bit of a picture. And they have been arrested for allegedly rigging underground poker matches. Now, as crazy as that sounds, we can continue to take it a step further because not only were they rigging underground poker matches, but they were also allegedly involved with several crime families that were involved with the mafia. And these poker matches took place all across the nation, but prominently within New York. Now, my first reaction was, I didn't even know that the mafia were still around, to be honest. I thought that that was a major crime group that got disbanded like back in the 60s and 70s. To know that they're still a thing, honestly doesn't surprise me, but also does surprise me because of just how old the mafia really are. But it's also crazy just to think that these guys have involvement and contact with them to really pull off an operation of this size. But how this was pulled off was even crazier. Basically, what would happen is that either the mafia or these players alone would reel players into these matchups by basically advertising and saying that if they go in and play these poker games, not only will they get to play against, but they will get to know and become friends with guys like Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones, former NBA type legends that a lot of people would love to know. And then once they brought them in, they would use some major high-tech technology to rig these games and basically win the most improbable hands that they would come down with. And when I say technology, I'm not saying that this was your normal rigged poker game where somebody from 50 feet away with binoculars is behind you, trying to look at your cards and whatnot and giving it to the person through a microphone. I'm talking about some high-tech technology here. They allegedly used X-ray tables to where you could actually see what cards your opponents had underneath the table. Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones are alleged for actually wearing contact lenses to where they could actually see different marks on the cards, and so they could know what happened. There are reports that they put in little tiny microscopic cameras into like the card carts that you get when your cards are shuffled out, so that they could see the cards. There's also talk about them rigging shuffling machines to the point where the shuffling machine knew what exact order the deck was in when it is entered. And so every time they shuffled out, they actually knew what cards were in every single person's hands without them even really knowing. It is some crazy stuff. And even crazier to think is this scheme, along with the scheme that Rozier was part of as well, this isn't just a minor operation that we have seen previously from other players where them and their buddies are able to rip off gambling for a couple of $1,000. According to FBI Director Kash Patel, This was a scheme that netted them millions and millions and millions of dollars. And a story even posted by CNN, who we know is a very, very credible news source, and we will actually look at their timeline as of right now, says that put out a report that said that at one point in one of the games, Chauncey Billups was winning so much with so many crazy improbable hands that a lot of his colleagues were actually calling on him to intentionally lose, because if he didn't, a lot of people would start becoming suspicious and they would start to believe that these games were rigged, and that they would start calling them out on this, and that there would be a possible investigation. And when you hear this, it's so crazy. First of all, first thoughts for me, honestly, was what freaking idiots these guys are. And these type of stories for me, honestly, as a reporter and reading about this, like I remember all the way back in 2018 when former Giants cornerback DeAndre Baker, and you had also a former Redskins cornerback as well. I can't remember his name, but they had, a robbery where they robbed a bunch of jewelry and got a couple of $1,000 on that. We've had so many recent gambling schemes within the past couple of years within sports. You have the Jonte Porter drama, where he was ripping off some guys off of illegal gambling. You had the Shohei Ohtani manager who had access to his bank accounts and was ripping him off and was doing some illegal gambling business as well. I mean, this has just become so common, and you just have to ask yourself why. Like, you are guys who are basically set up for life. You have millions and millions of dollars. Chauncey Billups himself, between the contracts that he got as an NBA player, between the current contract that he has right now, where I think that he's making like $5 million a year currently for the Portland Trailblazers, like there's really nothing left for him to really get here. Like why do you need more money? Why do you have to continue to push the boundaries? And I literally just looked this up on the spot because I thought that this was actually really smart to do. I just looked up Chauncey Billups' net worth. He's worth $35 million. Like, he does not need anything else. And his legacy was completely set. Like I said, he was supposed to be a future Hall of Famer. And whether this is true or not, this is just completely going to destroy all of that. But now to get to Terry Rozier's side of the story, because this one is a little bit more simple in how it was handled, but I think it has to be explained a little bit more. And Chauncey Billups himself is also allegedly supposed to be in this scheme as well. So what happened with Terry Rozier is he is being arrested for allegedly rigging online sports betting. Now, if you do not know how sports betting works, I'm going to try to explain this as simply as I can. So I apologize if this is a little bit confusing. But in sports betting, there are generally two basic bets that you can make as a sports bettor. The first bet that you can make is virtually just betting on a game as a whole. Basically, the sports bettor, they will make what is called a line, which basically means that they will look at the matchup between two teams. Let's say in this case, it was the Cavaliers facing off against the Charlotte Hornets. And they'll look at the overall odds of that game. Who is being favored? Who is the underdog? And they will give a certain amount of points to the underdog team, and you have to bet on that point line. So let's say that the point line for the Cavaliers versus the Charlotte Hornets was a plus 7 point line in favor of Charlotte. That means that as soon as the ball is tipped off, technically within the sports betting world, the Charlotte Hornets are up at that point 7-0. And you have to figure out if the Cleveland Cavaliers are either going to cover that 7 point line and they're going to win by 8 points or more, or if Charlotte is going to keep it close, if they're going to be able to either win the basketball game or lose by a lower margin than 7 points. And depending on that, you'll go ahead and win money. The second type of basic sports bet that there is, though, is actually betting on individual player statistics for that game. And that one is maybe a little bit more simpler to explain. So it's very, very similar to the game betting, where the sports book will set a specific line for that player based on previous performances that they had in previous games. So, for example, let's say that Terry Rozier was playing against the New York Knicks tomorrow night. Let's just say that he was. Let's say that for the past 5 games, Terry Rozier has averaged around 17.5 points per game. Let's just say that. The sports betting line would then put their line at for Terry Rozier to score 18 total points in his game for the New York Knicks. And what that would do is that would allow you, the bettor, to set up what is called a prop bet, or what you might more commonly hear as an over-under bet, which is basically means that you have to predict whether Terry Rozier will score under 18 points for that game against the Knicks or if he will score over. So to put it simply, if the line is 18 points per game and you bet under and Terry Rozier goes out and scores 12 points that game, you win the bet and you get your money. But if you bet under and Terry Rozier scores 35 points, then you lose and you end up losing your money. It sounds really, really simple, but it's definitely not an easy thing to consistently predict. I know as an experience as betting on sports that it's not as easy as it sounds, and things can be so unpredictable because players can have wild, crazy games on any given night, and they could also have the worst game of their life on any given night that can completely just screw you with how your bet is ended up setting up. But how do you rig this is really the question, especially being the NBA player himself. It's actually pretty quite simple. What would happen is Terry Rozier would call up his boys and said, hey, I see the sports betting line that they have for me for tonight's current game. Let's just stick with 18 points for this. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to play a specific amount of time. Let's just say that he ends up playing a whole quarter. And then what I'm going to do is that when there's a stoppage of play, when we go into the second quarter, when there's a timeout, when there's a foul or whatnot, I'm going to complain to the coach that I have an injury, that I'm sick or whatnot, and I'm going to basically take myself outside of the whole game, which is totally going to ruin the entire bet. So bet on my under. I'm going to score 6 points in the first quarter. I'm going to fake an injury. I'm going to be out for the rest of the game. But because I've played that certain amount of minutes, your bet is still going to be eligible in a way, and you're still going to be able to get your allotted money for that under that you bet on. And the big game that is being called into question was that exact situation that I called. It was a 2023 game against the Indiana Pacers, I believe. This was back when Terry Rozier was on the Charlotte Hornets, which, by the way, he got a pretty massive deal to be in Charlotte for a while. But it was the exact same situation that I just pointed out. The prop bet line was, 15 points or whatnot. He told his boys to bet on the under. He scored, I believe, 6 points in that game in 2023. He then faked an injury, and he was out for the rest of the game. And stuff like that not only is illegal for what he is doing, but also screws a lot of other people that are going out and betting on his over and are putting up their real money to go out, which is why also that game specifically was really, really important because there were tons of complaints for people that had a bet on him wanting their money back because he had only played for a quarter and they wanted them to make that game ineligible for their bets. And how Chauncey Billups is connected to this, and I understand if this is confusing, I know that this is all interwoven, but Chauncey Billups actually helped Terry Rozier with a little bit as well and helped a lot of his colleagues as well make bets because as a coach, he knew a lot of who was on the injury report prior to a game. He saw a lot of his players and what they were feeling like and what was going on through practice. So he would basically give his friends and his colleagues insider information about what was happening during practices, who was going to be injured, who wasn't going to be injured, who was playing on an injury, how he was going to set rotations and whatnot. And he was telling them to bet on those games based on what he was telling them, which again is illegal. Now, the big question about all of this is, are they guilty? Did they actually do this? Is this an actual credible arrest? Their lawyers, their attorneys have obviously came out and said that they're going to fight this. This is absolutely not true. That the current Trump administration and the FBI that is under him is simply trying to get a photo op, is simply trying to make a big deal out of nothing here, and nothing actually happened, and there's no basic proof about this. And just to stay on that topic, a reason why a lot of people are doubting why this is true is because, number one, the NBA had already been investigating Terry Rozier for that specific game that we mentioned against the Pacers in 2023 since the beginning of the year. And so far, they have said that there is no real credible evidence to really suggest that that actually ever happened and that those bets were made. And they never arrested him or put him on leave for really anything in connections to that NBA investigation. A bit questionable about this is just the basic timing about this. I mean, FBI Director Kash Patel said that this has been an investigation going on for years and years. And these are people that they have been wanting to pin down for a very, very long time. And people are asking the question, well, why didn't you do this sooner? And it makes it even more suspicious to look at the fact that the NBA had two amazing nights back to back. They had a great opening night and they had a great follow up to that, which included a lot of hype and propaganda around Victor Wembanyama, who had an amazing 40-point performance against the Dallas Mavericks and a blowout victory there. And a lot of people are seeing it as this current administration basically trying to take away from sports media, from sports hype, to continue to focus on what they are doing by making these arrests and basically ruining all of that hype. So all in all, what do I think about all of this? Are these guys guilty? Did they actually do it? I don't know. I really, really don't know. And I think that this is something that is going to take a very, very long time to actually prove. This is probably going to take for more than a year for charges to actually happen, because I think that there are a lot of very, very conflicting reports. And I actually think that on the prosecution's hand and the people that were making these arrests and these indictments, that there's not a lot of clear-cut evidence. At least there's not a lot of clear-cut evidence for Rozier's case with the big-time betting. This definitely could be a case where Rozier's defendants could come out and just say that this was something that was a freak accident, that he had an injury, that he didn't want to worsen it. And the fact that there was an NBA investigation into that and that it didn't come out with anything and that he was come out as innocent, I don't really see how they could really prove that he was guilty. But obviously, we don't know the full length of this case. In the case of Chauncey Billups, I think that there is a lot more against this, especially if you're going to have multiple people coming forward that were those fish that lost a lot of those monies in the rigged games. If they can prove and actually find some of the technology that these guys ended up using for this and actually show it, I think would be really, really interesting. And if they could do that, they could make a pretty strong case against Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones for actually being guilty against this. So I think that there's a lot of evidence towards Billups. I don't think that there's a lot going up against Rozier. And to say that the timing of these arrests after the NBA had an amazing couple of nights is a little bit shady, I think is a little bit of an understatement. I definitely think that there couldn't have been a worse time for them really to do it. Is this a sign of politics beginning to invade sports and trying to take away their hype? I'm going to say no, and that I hope not, and I hope that this isn't a continued thing. But you never know with what has been happening within the world recently, and I would not put it past anybody that they did this on purpose at this certain timing, and that these players were honestly guilty. Because as crazy as this story is, and as crazy as we might see a documentary about this, obviously we have heard even more crazy stories in other mediums of the world that we live in. So let me know about all that down below within the comment section. Do you think that these guys are guilty? Do you think that they're not guilty? Do you think that this was some type of scheme by the politicians in our U.S. government to potentially take away from the attention that was going on in the NBA? Let me know about that all down below, as well as subscribing to the channel, liking the video, commenting down below, and sharing with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You'll get to see my latest reaction to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Have a great weekend, and peace.